So thank you for being here, everyone. And my name is Ayla Nova, and I will be going over today how you can effectively calm your nervous system. And it is truly an honor to share this with you, as it is to share the practice of Yoga Nidra with you as well. So in today's video, we're going to be going over essentially how the nervous system operates, how you can begin to restore your nervous system, and how you can go beyond restoring the nervous system. So if you stay until the end, then we'll be able to dive into some very special news that I will be sharing with all of you for the first time. So with this all being said, since we're talking about the nervous system, I will be completely transparent with you that I need to check in with mine right now. Because before you're doing something where you're going live, you can start to feel a little bit of the flutter that goes on in the body. And when we haven't had an opportunity to better understand our body, we might have created connections to past experiences that tell us that a particular thing is happening. So with the sensations that are going on in my body, I would say that you could label them as maybe anxiety. But there's another way that you can also look at this when you have those experiences. What's really happening within me is an excitement because I am about to share with you something that I care deeply about. So I would love for us to first reset our nervous systems wherever we may be at. And this is an exercise that I like to add to the beginning of a Yoga Nidra practice. And you don't have to just use it before going into these practices. It's something where when you connect into the awareness that you're feeling out of your center, you can tap into it. And this is a practice brought to us through the awareness of Andrew Huberman. He took something that happens within our body physiologically and basically made it mainstream for us to be able to access it to help restore our nervous system. And this is called the physiological side. So one of the things that I like to do before diving into breath is when you do feel an activation within your nervous system is to connect to where you are spatially. Because if we immediately connect with our breath, we're connecting with air, which in those moments often feels like where we're at, either somewhere into the future or somewhere into the past. And when this happens, what do we need to do is we need to ground. So when you feel those flutters coming up, pay attention to the part of yourself that is touching onto a surface. For instance, right now I'm sitting on my couch. So recognizing that the seat of my body is resting onto the couch. This is going to bring us out of that airy energy and back into the body. And then from here, you can connect to your breath. So together, let's take a deep inhale, either through the nose or the mouth. And then a quicker, sharper inhale, filling the lungs to full capacity. And then exhale out through the mouth and let it go. And we can do this one more time or two more times. Deep inhale, sharper inhale, and exhale. Feel the shoulders peel away from the neck. And I like threes, so let's do it one more time. Deep inhale, sharper inhale, and exhale. Let it out through the mouth. And immediately, that nervousness, that excitement that I had coming on feels like what it could have been at like a 6 is now at like a 2. And I hope that you can use this practice whenever you feel that you need it as well. Now, to dive into yes, I did some homework. I made this beautiful page so that we could work on this together. So we'll just take a moment to admire this brain that I drew. This is my brain. Please send me a little heart if you love my brain. And for those of you that are just tuning in, make sure to like this video as well as share it. And if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, it means a lot to me, because the more people that do subscribe to the channel, the more reach that it gets, and the more people that are able to experience restoration of the nervous system. So, like I said, nervous system. We're going to discuss essentially how it affects the brain, and then how it affects the body, and the practices we can do to dive into restoring it. So what I have here, like I said, I drew this picture of a brain. Now, what activates the nervous system is sensory. So for an example, say that very early on in our life, we see a snake going across a path. This is going to send a sensory to our regulator, which is the autonomic nervous system, which we'll dive into more deeply in a moment, as well as a message to our endocrine system, which is our glands, maybe sweat, maybe sending hormones like adrenaline. And then this implants a memory. From that memory, we create an emotion. And from our emotion, a reward system is created. So perhaps we survived, or perhaps we got a sense of dopamine from that experience. And if you also listen to Andrew Huberman, he talks about, which we'll dive into later, how yoga nidra is a way to restore and replenish dopamine within the body naturally. So from that experience, then we create a behavior. So I don't know if you can see this. There we go. So I might have spelled that wrong. That's okay. You know how to spell behavior. So essentially what happens when we get the limbic system activated to the autonomic nervous system, it's going to send a message that is creating an aversion, which is maybe an averse experience, something that we don't enjoy, or an affinity, something maybe loving or warm. In this case, if we're seeing a snake, it's activating the sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight or flight. And now there is also freeze, flee, and fawn. When this happens, when we see that snake, it creates an electrochemical charge within the brain. So when an electrochemical charge happens within the brain, it then wires the brain to see that, creating a neural pathway. And there's actually a neuropsychologist, a Canadian neuropsychologist, that is known for saying, what fires together wires together. So we have the adverse experience of seeing a snake. Then what happens is an electrochemical reaction within the brain. And then from there creates a behavior. So this behavior that's been activated all the way down through the limbic system and into the body now becomes our automatic response to that experience. Now, I'm going to check in. Is everybody following along with this? Is this making sense? You can give me a thumbs up or some hearts if you're feeling like it's making sense. Perfect. Okay, so now that we have an understanding of how that works, there's also the parasympathetic nervous system. So when we have an affinity for an experience that's happening within our body, then this can create rest and digest. So when we are getting this information downloaded throughout our day, we are allowing ourselves to digest it. Now, there's also another part of the autonomic nervous system that doesn't get talked about a whole lot, but this is the enteric system. And this is our stomach. This is a way that we connect to our digestion. But it's not only just digestion. It's also, those gut feelings that we get. So this might come up before we experience what's happening. We have this almost intuitive part of ourselves. It's called the small brain. I don't know. There's more on that, but we're not going to dive too much into that. We're more so going to be discussing the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. So now that we know what's happening when an experience comes up and that this electrochemical charge is happening, what fires together wires together. So now we can recognize that when we have that experience coming up, that it's going to activate, or some people like to say trigger, this response. And over time, what can happen is that even if it's not a snake, let's say that it's just a stick on the ground, we're going to have a similar reaction to that experience. So, taking it out of the context of seeing a snake, you can see the relation of how you may have an adverse experience, maybe even in those developmental stages of the brain, maybe in early childhood, where you have an adverse experience. It activates the sympathetic nervous system. But if we don't have a way to reconcile that experience, then what can happen is it creates that memory that then becomes our place of responding to that all the time. We don't allow ourselves to go back into the parasympathetic. So you'll often see, an animal being chased. Afterwards, it would shake it off. Now, the other thing that we might do when we start to see these patterns or beliefs coming up for ourselves over and over again is we might start to think of solutions, think about ways that we can deal with it. But this is only a small portion of what's going to be able to help us, because if we have this experience early on in our lives and we're living out that experience in that pattern over and over and over again, then the grooves that are happening within the neural pathways of the brain become deeper. So, how do we take care of that? And also, how does this activation of the sympathetic nervous system show up for us? So I'm curious, how do you find that dysregulation shows up in your bodies? And you can type it into the comments of what that might be for you. For some of us, it's essentially tied to the experience of fear. So it might bring up anxiety. It could bring up stress, feeling stuck. Yeah. Any other ones that people are experiencing when they have this in their nervous system? Insomnia, having trouble sleeping. Because again, what are we trying to do when we get into that dysregulation? We're trying to solve it with the mind. But eventually we begin to realize that's not working. So what does work? Rest and digest. Rest and digest works. And so the practice of Yoga Nidra is a way that you are able to take those experiences, and rather than avoid them, you're allowing yourself to go back into the body to where you're storing this experience, which they talk about in the book, The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk, if you've heard of him. I have the book here, actually, The Body Keeps the Score. Really good, dog-tagged. Definitely, it's like a textbook, but a good read if you want to understand a little bit more deeply how the brain, mind, and the body heal through trauma. So the practice of Yoga Nidra is one of the ways that you can begin to restore the body. So what happens when you go through the process of Yoga Nidra is you're allowing the mind to connect back to the body. And I see someone has left here, Susanna, freeze or nightmares, tiring the keeps the body from sleeping. Yeah, so sleep can really be affected. Gut issues is another one that can happen. As you've likely heard, it becomes discomfort, dis-ease in the body. And if you've been following along on my channel for a while, you know that I am very familiar with dis-ease in the body. And so what I'd like to share with you is a practice that has really worked for myself and has also worked with the clients that I have helped through dysregulation in their nervous system, as well as the exhaustion of the inner critic that runs a little bit rampant if we allow it to. So, Yoga Nidra. Essentially, what we're doing in the practice of Yoga Nidra is we're allowing ourselves to go into the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest. So if you've listened to some of the recordings that are available, we're moving through the physical body. And again, that's why I mentioned when we feel the dysregulation coming up for us, it's really good to be able to check in, to feel grounded into our body. So first check in with your body. And then you can use breathing exercises. Breathing exercises like the physiological side is super easy to do, and you don't have to do it a lot. This is Biggie. He's feeling comfortable enough to pop in. And then from there, you can begin to check in with the emotional body. Because like mentioned here, what's happening is you're having a sensory experience. This is speaking to the regulation of the nervous system, the endocrine system, so how the body's response is going to be to it, as well as creating the memory, which is now tying it into monomai kosha, which is our emotional body, and the reward system that comes to that and the behavior. So when we get into this cycle, it creates a reaction. And the way that we can pull ourselves out of reacting to these experiences is by becoming self-aware. So Yoga Nidra is a practice that helps you build into self-awareness by connecting to your body, connecting to your breath and your energy, and then diving into the emotions that come up. Because when we have this emotional experience tied to this aversion or affinity, then we create the reward system and the behavior that comes with it. So we may want to think our way into a new behavior. But when you're allowing yourself to go into the parasympathetic nervous system through the practice of Yoga Nidra, it's training the mind to be able to observe so that you have more access to the choices that are available to you through that experience, which then begins to change those neural pathway grooves, those electrical chemical reactions within the brain, so that you can begin to come back into your body and begin to rest and digest the information that is there. Now, what can often happen for people like myself and maybe some of you as well that have experienced trauma is that you begin to dissociate from different parts of yourself. So through this practice, connecting the mind to the body, you do what is a body scan, and what in this book they talk about, which is the body keeps the score. You start to actually begin to recognize where you are holding information within yourself from previous experiences that you've had. But because you're in a state of the parasympathetic, you're able to witness them and choose how you respond to the experience. So this is basically like training for life when you go into this practice. And so when you become more aware of the choices that you have through this restful state, then when you have these situations come up in life that look like the snake but are really a stick, then you can begin to choose a different response. And this is very hard to do if you don't allow yourself to rest and digest through the experiences that you've been having. So, with all of that being said, what I want to share with you is that through the practice of Yoga Nidra and beyond, sharing these recordings for you, there's also a space beyond the practice where you can begin to integrate Yoga Nidra as a way to not only help restore your nervous system, but also those that are around you. So when we heal together. And so I'm very excited to announce to all of you that I have been opening up enrollment for the Peace in Rest program. And the Peace in Rest program is going to be a Yoga Nidra offering where we are going to be able to work together a couple of times a week as a group, and also at your own pace and on your own, where you can begin to help yourself become aware of the exhaustion that comes of the inner critic, begin to flip the narrative so that you can move from that state of survival into a state of freedom and growth. And through the practice of deep rest, you'll then be able to have exercises that you can integrate into your daily life so that you can start living from the Nidra state. And when we're living in a yoga Nidra state, this isn't that we're asleep, although Nidra is a sleepful state. We're actually living out of a space of awareness where we can see the limitless possibilities that are available to us and step out of the patterns, the beliefs, and the systems within ourselves that are no longer working. So I am going to be leaving in the comments a link. And if you are serious about really restoring your nervous system and going deeper into the practice, this is going to be Yoga Nidra, Nova Nidra for living. And once you have gone through the process of the Yoga Nidra for Living program, there's going to be the opportunity to go into Yoga Nidra for leading. So if you feel called to also offer this practice to others, that is going to be a door that's opening in the next year. So thank you all for tuning in with me. And of course, if this is something that is interesting to you, make sure that you send some hearts. And yeah, I'm so grateful that you have all checked in to better understand the nervous system and also deeply understand how you can effectively calm it with the practice of Yoga Nidra. And I'm excited to go beyond that and help you also begin to flip the script so that you can become the creator of your environment rather than a product of your environment. So with that being said, I hope that you all have a wonderful evening and continue to practice Yoga Nidra with me. And I will leave that link for you right here in the chat. And I'll leave it in the description after the video. So thank you all for being here. All right, take care. Let your friends know about this practice and have a wonderful night. Rest well. Be well. Namaskar.